Hi there, I'm Stephanie from HR Solver. Sadly, as it stands today, September 2020, and we have had announcements from the Chancellor last week around the end of the furlough scheme has been confirmed, and the job support scheme will replace that. Fabulous news. However, the way that the support has been framed is for sustainable jobs. And it's certainly expected through the announcements from ACAS and CBI, TUC, and their joint collaboration, and I completely endorse their statement, that asks employers to really consider redundancy as a last resort and treat employees with dignity, amongst other requests. It's because they forecast further redundancies. Many employers have already made redundancies. Some will have to go back and make more. And others have been waiting to see what the Chancellor's response was. So as we enter the last quarter of 2020, which has been no doubt the most difficult year of your life, it certainly has been for me. But fortunately, we've been healthy, and I wish and I hope that your family has been healthy too. And we continue to be healthy, but what's not healthy, as we can see, is the economy. And so I just wanted to spend some time today talking about the redundancy process. So as you as an employee who might be subject to that, and never been made redundant in your life before, understand that process. And there's two aspects to this process. There is a redundancy for bigger organisations, also called collective redundancy. And collective is where 20 or more positions are likely to go or being deemed at risk. And then there's redundancy under 20 for smaller organisations or smaller areas of an organisation where less than 20 heads have been projected to be cut. So I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview of what that looks like. I'll start with the larger redundancy cuts, and that basically is whereby your employer is obliged to follow a legal process for consultation with employee representatives, and it's for a minimum period of time. Normally 30 days or 45 days, depending on the size of the redundancies. Your employer must elect employee reps if there's no trade union in place, and your employer must consult with the employee body through that election or those trade union reps on the validity and the proposals for redundancy. So that should be happening at this side, and oftentimes an employer will also do individual consultation with you if you're deemed at risk on the other side, and concurrently or simultaneously. So employee reps will be meeting with your management and testing and challenging them on the case for redundancy. And suggesting potentially areas that could be saved or why it's not practical that this number of heads could be cut. But they should also be challenging the business case and asking maybe very uncomfortable questions of management around the financials of the business to really ascertain how sound the business case is for these redundancies and how long a cash flow projection before these heads need to be cut. Part of that process is a legal requirement for the reps to receive 7 different aspects of communication in writing from the employer, and in addition the HR1 form, which is a legal obligation for your employer to send to the local authority or the government, however you want to think of it. So if you're an employee rep, you should have those 2 pieces of written communication on the first day of the consultation. and you should be invited to a number of meetings with management in that 30 or 45-day period. And your role is to be feeding back to your elected employee body. So that might be a group of call centre employees, for instance. So you might be the representative for the call centre in, let's say, Edinburgh, where there's 20 employees, and you're responsible for taking that communication back to them, meeting with them, telling them what the management said, taking any of their proposals or questions back to management, and really being that go-between, that person that goes between the management and the employees. Sometimes it's not the easiest job. If you're elected, I wish you all the very best. I'm sure you understand the gravity of the situation, and I encourage you to be curious, ask questions, be prepared. If you're struggling with a member of staff who really wants to know everything, there's no harm in asking if they can come along with you to any management meeting. The management can always only refuse, but that might be helpful for you and them seeing the difficulties that you might be up against. Having a list of really insightful questions from your employee body to take to management is always your first step. If you're not involved in the employee rep consultation process and you're an employee, it's normally at least a 2-meeting stage, if not longer, which is a first and a second meeting. And the first meeting is where really it's checking your understanding of the company proposals, listening to your questions and any counter proposals you might have. So this meeting can be quite important in terms of you agreeing with the validity of the redundancy proposed. So this is where you need to get your head round any outstanding questions you might have. That could be, I'm not clear. Like last year, you announced £20 million profits, and now you're announcing these redundancy. Where have the profits gone? Where is the cash flow? Why aren't we able to preserve our jobs? What is the last gasp? Is this the last gasp attempt? Can you sit here to me and tell me that you have done everything in your power to mitigate against these redundancies? What pay cuts have management taken to avoid us getting here? What about shorter hours? Or what about reducing the pension scheme for a temporary period of time? All of these questions might be worth asking as an employee rep, or indeed as an individual speaking to management, to make sure that they have considered every opportunity for cost savings prior to coming to you about losing your job for the reasons of redundancy. The other thing that you might be thinking about is you're in an individual standalone role, and it doesn't seem fair that this role has been picked. And in that sense, it's absolutely important that you understand the rationale that has been put forward for why your job has been lost. And so the questions you want to be asking in that situation is, well, who's going to do my job? And it might be that, unfortunately, your job and your duties and tasks don't exist anymore, maybe for a COVID reason, or maybe just a change in business strategy. Both legitimate, but there might be other aspects of your job that will be going elsewhere. And it's really critical for you to understand where they're going, who's going to be doing them, and why can't you be doing them. So there's a few pointers for you to think about in that initial consultation. You should be asked in that individual consultation questions around, do you understand the proposals, and do you have any counter proposals? So that's your opportunity to put as many counter proposals on the table as possible. And then that normally is the first meeting, potentially in week 2 after the announcement, and then maybe 3-4 weeks after, you might have a second consultation meeting where you'd be expecting the employer to come back to you and answer the questions and or explain why the proposals you have made are legitimate and accepted and will be put in place, or alternatively the opposite, that they have explored and don't find that they're making valid enough cost savings to save your job. This is a hard message and a hard communication to hear, but often the communication that comes back in these situations. If you're in a pool of people, that second meeting will potentially be about why you have been selected out of a pool of 10 potentially, and there's 5 jobs. So in that situation, you might be given your score, and you're sitting in the meeting, and the manager is going to try and explain your score, explain the criteria, and why you therefore have been selected for redundancy. Another incredibly hard meeting and very hard to prepare for, but you should be able to receive in advance of that meeting your score and the rationale and the explanations for why you've scored a 4 and not a 5, and you know, sit down. The best advice I can give you with that is really go through the criteria, and where you believe it's been unfair, find evidence to counter it. So if you have been awarded a 3 for customer service, and yet you've had 4 emails over your employment history from delighted customers where you've gone the extra mile, put that in front of them and say, totally disagree with this mark on this basis. And normally you will find that the manager or the scorer in the situation will potentially review and increase that mark. And it might change everything. It might save your job. It has been seen to be done. So, you know, really think about that, and do not be afraid to pull out information or evidence to show where you have gone the extra mile. It's very hard to compare yourself to your colleagues because you will oftentimes not see their scores. Certainly I encourage you to question, again with evidence-based information at your fingertips, on why somebody might be considered safe and not now progressing into second consultation where you are, and find specific examples of that and ask them to reconsider. And then the next meeting can often be the confirmation of your redundancy. And that again might be another week down the line. But hopefully this timeline and these kind of meetings and the content of these meetings of redundancy has been helpful to you. And you should always be given the right of appeal if you are in fact confirmed as redundant. And certainly appeal it if you feel that there has been the process has been rushed or it's been unfair. Any other questions, please hop over to hrsolver.co.uk, and we're ready and willing to help you with anything else you might have. All the best and thank you.